Diane from Millhouse Quilts, and today we're talking about memory quilts, specifically memory quilts made from men's ties. Men's ties, as you know, are mostly silk, maybe some cotton, and they can be kind of hard to work with, but we'll show you what to do. When my father-in-law died, we collected some of his ties, and I made a block for every one of his children and grandchildren. His name was Arthur, and we called this Arthur's Ties. And I thought it was really fun because everybody got a star and Grandpa was up in heaven, so we can all just kind of be with him. And I put it in a frame because everybody knows how to hang a frame, something on the wall, but if you hand them a little quilt for the wall, they may or may not know how to hang it. So it's bound and all framed, all ready to go. So when you're working with ties, if you look at the back, they usually have a label up here, and then there's a backing piece down here. So the first thing you do is take off the label, and here I have the label off, and then you have to rip out this seam, and it usually comes out really, really quickly. It's usually big stitches and just a few things that get it right out. And then you'll notice lots of times there's this interfacing in there. This one happens to be 2 layers fused together, and there's always some kind of a nice fancy looking piece right there so that when the end flips up it looks nice, but it's just a little piece down in the end. Here's another one that I've already opened, and again you can see the fancy piece at the end and the interfacing piece. So you take the interfacing out, and then you take off this end piece, and you'll have a nice piece that's rather triangular, elongated shape. It's always bigger down here, and it always gets narrower, narrower, depending on the style of the tie, depending on when they wore it. It can be really wide, really narrow, but it always tapers down. Depending on how much fabric you need, you may not use any of this tail, or you may need a lot of it. But because almost all men's ties are silk, and they're cut on the bias, you have to fuse a backing to them. Otherwise, they just go all over the place. So I have another one here opened up all the way, and I have fused so far this far. If I need this fabric, I will put more fusible on here. But I've started down here, and now that I have the fusible on, I can treat this just like regular yardage, and I don't have to worry about the bias. The first time I tried using these, I didn't fuse them, and I was cutting here and I had my sewing machine about right here. And I would cut and I would pick up and carry to my sewing machine, and the piece would go bloop, and it was not the same size when it got here as what it was when it got there because of the bias, and it just stretched all out of shape. And I tried to be really careful. So back it, and then you can do anything you want to it. This one's got this fun stripe in it, and you could play with the design of the stripe, you know, if there's a certain part you wanted to get, or up here it's a little more solid. So this can actually look like several different fabrics depending on where you cut the stripe. I have a couple other, this is just the friendship star, this little star, and I have a couple others done up. This one I used, it was 2 striped ties that kind of coordinated, and I put the darker one as the border and the lighter one in the middle. Here again, 2 ties that contrast and go together nicely, and I just kept, this one's kind of busy. This one is a little calmer, but again, it's 2 ties. You can see the back. I've got it all fused. That seam allowance looks a little bit big. And here's another one with a different kind of fusible. This one, I have a little bit bigger border, and again, I use the same stripe as here, but you can see how different it looks when I paired it up with a different kind of tie. And then on this one, I used 3 different fabrics. I have the same star as the center here, and then 2 other ones here, and I kind of picked up the rust in this one and then added a real subtle navy one that has a stripe but it's a little bit subtle. You can make the same block, or you can make all different kinds of blocks. Have them the same size, different sizes, make a single block, make a whole bunch of blocks and put it together into a quilt. You can add shirts, you can add anything you want to. When you're doing a memory quilt, the very most important thing is the memory that you get from it. ignore things, or if there's stains and things, if there's a tie with a stain on it, lots of times it's fun to use that because that's probably one that they wore. Maybe there's a story that goes with the stain. I mean, don't always kick out things that you might think are a little bit blemished. When you're doing a memory quilt, you're after the memory. Happy quilting from Millhouse Quilts.